This comment on a recent reel brings up a great question. Why were you never taught about Joseph Smith's Seer stone as a kid?
It's because understanding that Joseph Smith was a convicted con man for scrying, who was known to use his magic rock to defraud people for money, would have negatively impacted Latter-day Saint testimonies. It's because it's fundamentally embarrassing to admit that Joseph Smith was famous for so much illegal activity, going on many treasure digs where, wait for it, he found absolutely nothing. The same stone that was used to defraud his neighbors and brought the wrath of his community was the same stone that he used to find the one-of-a-kind gold Bible. That's convenient. Generations of LDS church leaders prioritized faith-promoting fairy tales about the translation process over telling us the truth. It's not a stretch to say that they were hoping that we wouldn't notice.
Even though Joseph's use of a seer stone was widely known and talked about during his lifetime and throughout the rest of the 1800s, it was a topic that came to be misunderstood and doubted in the mid-1900s in the church.
Hey, Sister Denial, it's only misunderstood because the church controlled the narratives surrounding the seer stones. It disingenuously kept back this information from the members and the church at large about Joseph Smith using various peepstones. It's not a misunderstanding, it's a deliberate hiding of church history, an LDS staple. The truth wasn't misunderstood, it was suppressed.
So in 1956, the then apostle Joseph Fielding Smith even stated his opinion that, quote, "There is no authentic statement in the history of the church which states that the use of such a stone was made in that translation. The information is all hearsay, and personally, I do not believe that this stone was used for this purpose."
The problem here is that Fielding Smith was the church historian before he made the statement for over 3 decades. He knew very well about Joseph Smith using seer stones. So no, I don't believe Fielding Smith's dubious quote at all, and no one else should either. Fielding Smith was a master at crafting a narrative that suited his agenda, and let's be clear, he was deeply invested in preserving a particular version of history, one that glossed over the messy, inconvenient truths. Fielding Smith didn't just miss some details. He actively buried embarrassing church history in his vaults, systematically preventing these narratives from coming to light. His agenda was crystal clear: distorting the facts, maintaining control, and making sure no one dared to question the dominant narrative. And adding insult to injury, Fielding Smith was probably the last person in the world that we should be asking about church history, and about what church leaders knew or did not know about Joseph Smith's famous Rock in the Hat. It's like interviewing Warden Norton about the corruption and murder at Shawshank Prison, getting his statement of innocence, and then believing him. Fielding Smith wasn't just passively ignorant. He was actively working to suppress the facts and rewrite LDS history to fit his particular image of the church. A prime example of this is how Fielding Smith personally cut Joseph Smith's 1832 First Vision account out of Letterbook 1. This was no mistake or oversight. It was a deliberate attempt to shape the narrative by removing any record that didn't align with his personal view of church history. So when it comes to taking Fielding Smith's word on anything, especially the seer stone issue, we should be extremely cautious. His scholarship was anything but objective. It was nothing but a carefully constructed facade to keep inconvenient truths hidden from the public.
So a lack of concrete evidence may have created doubt about its use, which was later cleared up with additional study and research.
Try again. None of this was cleared up by study and research from church historians. It was cleared up when the church was forced to come to the table in the age of the internet. Without the World Wide Web, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints would still be lying to all of us about Joseph Smith's use of the magic rock in his hat. Thank God for people like Sandra and Gerald Tanner, D. Michael Quinn, and Grant Palmer, who brought us the truth that Mormon leaders stubbornly refused to reveal. LDS critics were doing the study and the research to expose the truth when the Mormon church was too busy obfuscating it.
But it seems that the church wasn't hiding the seer stones.
If the church wasn't hiding the stones, then why didn't they tell us about them until the 2010s? And if you believe Grant Palmer's narrative, the church still has a number of other seer stones that it refuses to release. Those stones haven't been made public. Oh, and Joseph Smith's chocolate-colored egg-shaped seer stone, well, you're not going to find it in the Church History Museum at Temple Square. They keep it under lock and key at church headquarters, in some vault somewhere. So no, the stones are still being literally concealed from us today, just as they were for generations. So much for transparency.
But it seems that the church wasn't hiding the seer stones, but that there was confusion.
Well, Sister Gaslighter, The only confusion about the Seer stones at church headquarters was how many different depictions of Joseph Smith's translation process they could make without showing the actual stones before the members would actually catch on to the deception. All of the artwork produced for generations concealing the stones in hats was inaccurate. And as Richard Bushman said, that dominant narrative could not be sustained because of the increased access to information about early Mormon church history from people like Dan Vogel and Fawn Brody. Hell, even South Park knew the truth about the magic rocks before most members, but no amount of LDS leader misdirection could keep the truth buried forever.
A confusion that would have been exacerbated by the fact that Joseph Smith and his associates would often refer to both the interpreters provided by Moroni and Joseph Smith's seer stones as the Urim and Thummim.
In a peculiar effort to make the seer stones seem more biblical, early Mormon leaders started referring to them as Urim and Thummims because the term peepstone kind of reminds people of ridiculous religious folk magic. Sections of the Doctrine and Covenants were even secretly rewritten to minimize mentions of the stones, like when the Book of Commandments was published in 1835. The church made a systemic and deliberate attempt to scrub the mystical and magical worldview of Joseph Smith and his occult practices from its history for generations, including and especially regarding the mystical stones. It was all about making Joseph Smith's laughable method look more acceptable to a mainstream audience. But the magic rocks and occult practices were just too real to ignore, so they eventually had to come clean about the lies.
So was it a hidden topic?
Yes, it was a hidden topic.
So was it a hidden topic? Probably not.
And who knows what other hidden topics the church has that they simply won't tell us about. There's probably a bunch of embarrassing church history that's buried in vaults that will never see the light of day. Don't be surprised if this rock in the hat hidden narrative is just the tip of the embarrassing iceberg.
It seems more likely that it was simply a matter of waiting for concrete evidence to bring the topic up.
No, Sister Brainwash. Let's not pretend that this was some innocent case of waiting for the right moment. Mormonism was and still is all about control. The church has long used its power to shape and restrict access to information. It has shown a troubling pattern of disregarding informed consent. The generations of lies about seer stones wasn't just some happy accident. It was a deliberate effort to control information and avoid controversy. Church leaders could have come clean at any point, but for over 100 years they chose not to. Only when they absolutely had to, in the face of overwhelming evidence in the digital age, did they finally start addressing the thousands of lies of omission. It was never about waiting for evidence. It was about keeping the uncomfortable truths buried, kind of like the rock in the hat itself.
And so I'm throwing my entire family heritage away. I'm free. Where's the polyamory and the drugs?